So, Kendrick had to pop out and show Drake real quick at the pop out concert real quick in Compton. It's like, man, like Kendrick was able to unite people who have avowed. So they've literally killed one another's friends.
He created a new collective identity.
A new collective identity.
Kendrickism.
Yeah, Kendrickism. Like we've all united to hate a dude from Canada. What up, though, family? Welcome to Dig In with Dr. Los, where we're going to be discussing theology, culture, and maybe a little cuisine. But I want to welcome you to this podcast episode that we're going to dig into today. And over the last few weeks, I've been preaching on rooted relationships, and God's design for those relationships and how he gives us health and connectivity in various relationships. And I'm super excited to kind of dig into these topics. I've been preaching on it, and I've actually been surprised at the amount of people over the last few weeks who have been super responsive to these sermons because I'm gonna be honest, when I started out, it was a more topical series, and it was a hard left from the series we had been in. But I just sensed the Lord telling me that, hey, we need, given where we are as a culture, what's going on in our world, we need to focus on rooted relationships. And so I made that pivot, and the response from our congregation here at Refresh has been absolutely incredible. So we're going to be digging into those topics a little more today. And to help me do that, I have our executive director. Her name, she's incredible. Before I even tell you her name, I want to tell you all about this lady. She is a wife. She's a mother. She is a ministry leader. And she is just an all-around brilliant and awesome person who is great at asking questions. So I would like to introduce you to the incomparable, the amazing, the incredible executive director of Refresh Community Church, Mrs. Sabrina Rhodes. So part of what we're going to be doing on Dig In with Dr. Los, we're going to have Sabrina's here with us today, but we're going to have a variety of our staff, sometimes our members from Refresh Community Church, where I am the pastor, just so you can get a flavor, not just of me, but of our congregation. Our congregation is diverse. It's made up of a lot of people from a lot of different walks of life, from every age, stage, ethnicity, culture, background. And so I want to give us a flavor of that on this podcast. So welcome.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
So you ready for me to ask you some questions?
Yeah, ask me some questions. I know you listen to the sermons. Did you?
I definitely did. Twice.
Oh, let's go.
Yeah,
Twice.
It's good work. These are really good. Timely for me too. Mm-hmm. And really motivating and inspiring. But are you ready for my questions? Because I have a lot.
Listen, people, these questions. Most of her job is asking me questions. It's true. And it'd be something.
It's true. They're endless. This podcast won't be endless, but my questions are endless.
Yes. Like she just asks questions, and I just be like, wow, thanks for that question. I'd be like so hyped. Like I'd be like, y'all just got to see what our staff means. Be like, I'd be hyping up staff. Like, yeah, we're gonna do this and this vision, and it'd be great. And then she started asking questions. I'm like, hey man,
it's true.
Hey, I'm trying to just don't ask the questions right now. We're just trying to do the thing.
Just trying to be excited.
Yeah. And then she'd be starting to analyze it. So
this is perfect for that, though. This is perfect for both of our gifts.
It is. It definitely keeps our ministry, not just excited. We got excitement and energy, but we also have strategy and direction.
We do.
So you be executive directing out in these streets. I appreciate it.
I'm just going to ask you questions today, though. You are the expert, and I'm going to start asking. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right. So you've alluded to it a little bit already about like what motivated you to preach this series. Like, obviously there are things that you observe in the congregation, but what have you been observing in the culture that had you feeling like we need to do a series on rooted relationships?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. One of the things as I thought about this whole series, rooted, God's design for healthy relationships. Some of it was kind of pragmatic. I'm a pastor, I pastor church. Our mission statement is plant, root, grow, multiply. planning commitment, rooting relationship, growing discipleship, multiplying service. So, digging into our mission statement a little more. But also, man, I was reading all this stuff about, and from a variety of news sources, from a variety of resources, with different biases too. Everything you read, every news source, whatever, they got their biases, but everybody, regardless of worldview, was agreeing that people are lonelier.
Yeah.
Relationships are suffering, marriages are struggling, and all these things. Social media is contributing to the mental health downfall of adolescents and things. And so, what I've learned in just my time pastoring is that if things are affecting the culture, that means it's in your church, because your church exists in the culture. These are people who go to work, they go to school, they're out here, and so they are. If the folks out there are struggling in their marriage, it's folks in here. 100%. If people out there are lonely, people in here are lonely. If people out there are trying to figure out how to connect in a digital world, people in here are. And so I figured, man, we have to, I believe big, this whole podcast, everything is like, how do we take the scripture, theology, these things that we say and claim about Jesus, and really, how does the rubber of the scripture hit the road of life every day? And so I was like, man, the Bible has some great things to say about, how we have healthy relationships, and God created us for a relationship and he designed it. And so I'm like, man, we need some help in this area.
Yeah. Super necessary.
Yeah.
Right. So you gave a vision for friendship, that one of the first attributes was covenantal.
Covenantal.
Pow, pow.
It's a theology word.
I mean, big word.
Told you theology. We gave you some cuisine.
There's so much theology in here. So covenant relationship, if you're a believer, you hear that and it feels big. It feels heavy. It feels weighty. And it's usually only talked about in marriage or in our relationship with Christ, because covenantal is like till death do us part.
Oh yeah, we
right?
Yeah.
But you say that all humans should have some covenantal friendship.
Oh yeah.
And that is outside of marriage.
Absolutely.
So walk that out. That's probably mind-blowing for most people.
Yeah, I think it is. I think we're more familiar with it than we think, though.
Okay.
I think we don't think of it in those terms because it's not in a church institution. But again, I told you, image of God is all over the place. You just got to look. Okay. I think we see this in gang activity all the time.
You're so right.
Yeah, it's all the time. Like, so I'm from Detroit, 6 Mile. What up, though? That's why I say what up, though. I'm from Detroit. I'm Detroit people. But I personally, I was not a part of, like, I never got jumped in. I didn't follow through with it. But I was gang adjacent. I'll just say that. I had a lot of friends, who repped a lot of different sets. And so, I seen how, and we still see it, I had homies that was like Vice Lords and Crips and Bloods. And
Ride or die.
Ride or die. Like literally, like when you're in there, you know what I mean? Like you, and so if the big homie got beef, you got beef. It don't matter if he was wrong. You don't need no context. Right. If I'm out here with the big homie, and we riding. That's it. And if whatever happens, happens. And that's what, like, people talk about the no snitching culture. I'm not saying it's right, but what they don't understand, I also talk about covenant loyalty. Yeah, that's what it's about. So if it means I do a 25-year bid, I don't break that loyalty. Again, now what sin and Satan tends to do is he takes things that are good, beautiful, and glorious, distorts them, and then they get worked out in things like gang wars. And
they don't have all of the kingdom.
They don't have all of the kingdom.
Pieces of it.
But if you like that is the picture of it. I mean, if I had to, like, I could just like, hey man, go to your local, go and find your local Crips and ask them about. And these are same gender. Like, so think about this. Think about for a moment. I ain't gonna. Okay, check this out.
He argues with himself.
I do all the time, regularly. But look, so, Kendrick had to pop out and show Drake real quick at the Pop Out concert real quick in Compton. And you watched it, like part of it, what was so, whoever you feel, Kendrick just overkill. But anyway, but if you watch that video, man, you on stage, you got Crips and Bloods holding, like Crip, like the Blood stepping, the Crip walking, like he brought together these people who are supposed to hate each other. Yeah. Right. And part of the commentary, I saw a lot of cultural commentary on that moment. It was like, man, like Kendrick was able to unite people who have avowed they've literally killed one another's friends.
He created a new collective identity.
Kendrickism. Yeah, Kendrickism. Like we've all united to hate a dude from Canada. Oh my God. But anyway, but here's my point though. man, you see these relationships, man, when in those like gang activity and things like that, you see them in prison and things like this. But their pictures, if you notice, I heard some people commenting because the dudes were holding hands and were dancing. These were the most thugged out dudes, and like ain't what nothing they were
about that.
yeah they were just, and people like, why are they holding hands, da, da, da. And I'm like, no, this is a powerful moment because these dudes are showing unity, and they were same gendered covenanted relationship, nothing sexual at all about these dudes, nothing like that. But if you're outside that culture,
yeah,
you've never seen two dudes holding hands dance and win.
Yeah,
but you've seen it
not here.
Not here, but you've seen it with some gang activity stuff at a Kendrick concert. Here's my point. Covenant love is a love that says, man, I will die for you. I'm going to tell you somebody else who has this. And we just don't have it in evangelicalism and Protestantism because we have so imbibed rugged American individualism, bootstraps, frontier revivalist preaching here in America. Man, when you see those, like when you think about those, so I hang out from time to time with some Orthodox friends of mine and learn things from them. But
Orthodox Jewish?
No, Orthodox Christian.
Oh, Christian.
Yeah,
okay.
Eastern Orthodox.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I got a homie who's over at a Orthodox church, a priest that I talk to from time to time. And so I've been studying the tradition and just conversing with him about things. And so I learned about the monks on Mount Athos. I actually ordered. They make really good like Christian jewelry and wine and olives and stuff. So I just ordered some stuff from Greece for no reason. It's not even expensive.
You did.
Yeah. So I actually got some dope prayer beads and stuff from the monks on Mount Athos. But anyhow, I bring those guys up because they're monks, but they live in like a spiritual friendship. They have to have one another because none of them are married.
Yeah.
They're all there together and they're caring for one another. There's like, and so same thing with nuns, same thing with priests. And so in some of these other ancient Christian traditions that prize monasticism and spiritual friendship, you see this. Like, but in the evangelical flavor, we're the ones who over here like, what's going on?
Yeah, and my, suburban home with my attached garage and
neighbors I never talk to.
Neighbors I never see.
yeah. And no front porch, just a really big back porch.
Yeah, man, it's true. We're all guilty. So then paint a picture then of what would it look like for the Western church, and I know that's a broad brush, but what would it look like for the church? What would change? What would look different if the church if individuals in the church committed to having covenant friendship? What do you think would be different culturally?
Yeah, that's a great question. What would be different culturally? Man, that's a good question. I told y'all, man, questions. What I think would be different is that I think church and how we experience worship would be radically different. It would be so much less consumeristic. I think one of the reasons that our worship and our churches are so consumeristic, particularly of the evangelical sort, is because who we care about is us and our nuclear family.
Yeah.
It's like, it's just us. And so that's what matters. That's this, that, and other. I think that's what makes it hard at times to have diverse churches because we center our own preferences. And so we want to be people who are like us and people who are individuals like us because us don't want to be uncomfortable.
Comfort.
But yeah, absolutely. But when I'm thinking about the other and they actually come first, not I'm just thinking about them, but they come first. Man, that makes me far less consumeristic about church, about worship. It also makes my dinner table a lot bigger. It also, very practically, I think it would help us as we, one of the big questions of the day is how does the church relate to people in the LGBTQIA community? I think that one of the failures that the church has to admit to is that, the conversion therapy and I heard one very prominent Christian leader talk about shunning your kids and putting them out on the street and all this other stuff. Literally heard him. And like, if I said his name, y'all all know him. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. And so, I have family members who are a part of that community and I have my biblical convictions around, what proper sexuality and blah, 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 biblical sexuality and all that stuff is. But at the end of the day, there are faithful, Jesus-loving people who have a variety of orientations sexually. And what does our homes look like when we can have rooted relationships, deep relationships with people who think differently, exist differently, pursue Jesus in different ways, like, man, I think it revolutionizes, like, our church becomes less self-centered, becomes less consumeristic,
Yeah.
and I think our homes become wider.
Yeah.
And yeah, so those are my immediate thoughts.
I had another thought, and I feel like you touched on it a bit, and it kind of goes back to our earlier conversations. I think about singleness,
Yeah.
and how if covenant relationships, if being in covenant relationship were a norm, would there be such a crisis of singleness per se? And by crisis of singleness, I don't mean people being single, because Jesus was single and Paul was single, but this idea that somehow you are less than, or you are experiencing less in the world because you are unmarried. But if you had covenant, if there were covenant friendships, would there even be as much desperation for some for marriage? And not that there isn't a desire for marriage, but I just wonder about how that sort of changes the landscape for those who are single and will live as single, either temporarily or for their entire lives.
Yeah.
Like, how does that change?
Oh, man. I think it changes drastically, because I actually think some of the crisis, I think Hollywood and our culture and all the things that romanticize those types of relations, that romanticize marital and romantic, I think is part of it. But I also think the church is a huge part of the problem.
Huge.
I mean,
It's idolized in some
particularly, again, the evangelical church space, man, where it's just like, man, you know, marriage is... It's just put on display. And look, I don't want to trash marriage. I'm married, happily married for the last almost 17 years.
God, right?
Yeah, so I don't want to poo-poo marriage. Don't hear me hating on marriage. Yeah. But I also think that in the evangelical church, man, we have like gotten up like Jesus wasn't single for 33 years, and Paul didn't write 1 Corinthians 7. And so, I think because we have so exalted it in a way that I actually think the Bible doesn't. So if you read the whole Bible very carefully, you actually see that most of the patriarchs and most of the people in the Bible had fraught marriages. Like Abraham.
Slightly disturbing.
It is profoundly. Abraham gave Sarah away to the Pharaoh and said, hey, tell him that we brothers and sisters, because we kind of are weirdness in the Bible. I'll talk about another podcast. But
twice.
Yeah. And then Jacob did something. No, it was Isaac did the same thing. Isaac did the same thing. Then you fast forward, you got Moses, who was leading the nation and just sent his whole family away while he was doing it.
Just bye.
Like, hey, I ain't got time. Y'all just go and live with Jethro.
She was a sister too.
Yeah, she was a sister. She's black. Like, how you gonna do support her like that, Moses?
Right.
Then you get Job, who's suffering. His wife tells him, curse God and die.
That was not a good example.
That wasn't a good example. And so my point is this, and yet all these people I just named are in the Hall of Faith.
They are.
And so the Bible does not put marriage in this place where the marriage has to be perfect, that you have to have marriage at all. It exalts singleness and shows us how you can be a completely whole image bearer and be single. So again, spiritual friendships, man, like when we understand that a friendship can be close and covenantal, like you can say, I will take a bullet for you. Like, I don't want to say we need like Holy Ghost Crips or something, but like I will I need some sanctified vice lords. But like, I will literally, I'm covenanting with you, life or death. Like we are brothers and sisters, we're walking together. And it does not have to be of a sexual sort. You can live a full life. Now, Jesus and Paul is very clear. That's not a calling for everybody. Right. For some people, like, hey, they need those romantic interactions. They need sexual interactions. Certainly nothing wrong with it. God ordains it.
They can't stay holy.
Yeah. Can't stay holy. Like, some folks just like, And so God said, hey, get married. It's cool. It's fine. Yeah. But, when we over exalt marriage, I think we can end up in a place where we manufacture a crisis of singleness, which I think Hollywood and the church have done.
And one of the things that you talk about is that even as you closed in the sermon, you talked about how when you're talking about all these attributes of friendship, covenantal, selflessness, loyalty, like you're describing something that I think is making people think, well, where am I going to find that? I mean, what? Like, who is deserving of my loyalty at that level? Like, who am I trying to be selfless? Who's going to be selfless toward me? Like, who's going to covenant with me? But you closed by saying, it does cause us to ask that question, but the question we should be asking is, how can we be that kind of friend? And that was the juke, the Jesus juke at the end, but also kind of mind blowing, because as I referenced the Keller quote, there's this reality that actually no one can fully be this kind of person to us. Because as you listen, you're like, this is an impossible task. but rather we're learning about the attributes of friendship so that we can image Christ and
Absolutely.
imitate him in that. And like, that's kind of the point, that we see it as a motivation for how we engage with the other.
Absolutely.
And I just felt like that was a powerful, just way of thinking about it. I used a phrase at the very end, look for someone who can create safety to come off the battlefield. I just was like, that was a moment. You know, like you can really picture what it's like to find someone that is safe for you to come off the battlefield. Do you want to say any more about that aspect of how to find a person to actually invest friendship in?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I would say a couple things. I would say, prayerfully. Prayerfully, like, you have to always, as you're engaging new friendships, engaging new relationships, you always want to, some people like can give of themselves too quickly, too fast.
That's true.
So it's like, hey, if that's, some people aren't wired that way, but some people are. Like, you have to know yourself. And so if you're kind of wired towards like, I can't wait to, just like be prayerful, be thoughtful, ask the Lord to reveal. But I also believe that, man, we don't have to look that far. Like, we are all like connected to so many people. I think sometimes what slows us down is that we have this idealized friend, or this happens in romantic relationships, and we're looking past people that are often being very good friends to us, but they're not our preferred friend.
Okay.
And so we kind of overlook them.
They get on our nerves. They got some quirks or tendencies.
Yeah. And so it's like, and I think obviously we know this happens regularly in dating relationships. They got to be this, they got to be that, they got to be blah, 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 blah. And it's like, there's the really good person making $70,000 a year. He's 5'3", he loves Jesus, and he's right there. But you won't date him because he's not 6'3" and he doesn't make $278,000.
Yeah.
And he's like right there,
Wow.
And you just, but we do the same thing in dating or friendship relationships where it's like, hey, there are people who are often like really good friends to us who have demonstrated a care for us, but they don't fit whatever our, or maybe, we got a vision for our clique or whatever, and they ain't cool enough or whatever. So I would say, maybe open your eyes and make sure that you're not dismissing someone who has perhaps maybe even already demonstrated some loyalty, some friendship, some care for you, and reciprocate. But I do
reciprocate.
Yeah. But I do think, I believe very strongly that what Jesus does with our whole human existence is he, Martin Luther talks quite a bit about sin warping us and turning us inward.
Yeah.
And so I think we approach all of our relationships with what can I get out of it?
Yeah.
And what Jesus does in every way is he orients us radically outward. He orients us towards even, loving God, loving neighbor. He orients us outward because Christianity is an Eastern religion of paradoxes. It's not even a Western religion, and it's full of paradoxes and tensions. And one of those tensions is that somehow, some way, when you become selfless, you become fulfilled. Like,
it's mind-blowing.
It is. It is like when you somehow think about yourself less, you will you will be filled.
Somehow it's like part of our design.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
We resist it because mentally it feels like that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But it's actual real fulfillment.
Yeah, it reminds me of when my dad, he was teaching me to drive in Detroit on some ice, and my dad was a cop, so he knew how to drive quite well. And I remember like we were in the car and it was ice on the ground. He was teaching me to drive in ice. And I was trying to turn and the car started sliding. And I'll never forget, and my dad was cool as a cucumber. I'm like, I'm finna wreck this thing. My dad was cool as a cucumber, partially because he was a cop, and he said, you need to turn the steering wheel into the slide. He was like, your instinct is to turn the opposite direction, but that's just making you spin. Turn into it. And the car straightened out. And when I did what he said, it was super counterintuitive. Like everything in me wanted to fight with it. He's like, if you do that, you're just going to do this.
Wow.
He like turned into it. And when I did it, the car it straightened out.
Wow.
And Dad was cool as a cucumber. And so I think same thing, like it's counterintuitive to say, okay, and we do it. And I don't want to minimize. I really want to be clear. I don't want to minimize. Like, man, we have real relational needs. Like we really are, I just said, like we're lonely. Some of us who for us, celibacy is not an option. Like, singleness, a life of singleness, we're like, yo, Los, we hear you. No. Like for some, like you really want that husband or that wife, like that's all real. And at the same time, what Jesus has said, and I've never seen him be wrong. Like I'm a Christian because I've really tested Jesus's like hypotheses about how to live this world, and they work every time. Like when we center other people, we will be filled. And here's the ultimate thing, and I've just learned that Jesus has done. He always do this, man. I've learned that Jesus wants us. He's when he says in the Ten Commandments, like, I'm a jealous God, like no gods before me. I think sometimes God wants us to get out of ourselves so that we can experience Him being our fulfillment, Him being that friend.
First,
yeah, first. And I think, like, at the end of the day, every single relationship is going to come up somewhat short.
Yep.
Like, and so I think we have to get there. And again, I'm not saying that in a Jesus Juki way. I'm just keeping it real. Like, I've seen, so
because then we are focused less on what we're getting because we're fulfilled in our relationship with Christ.
Absolutely.
Our relationship with our friends is complementing, it's pointing us back to Jesus. But when they fail, we will have anticipated it on. So it doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. As you talked about it, where it's painful, but we're not depending on that for our life source.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, that's the difference. It's like, like we're all going to experience heartbreak and disappointments and things like this. But it's like when I know that God is really my source. I'm telling you, like, I've been doing this personal study on David. Like, the Lord just a few months ago just like said, hey, you need to study David. So I'm studying everything about the life of David.
Complex individual.
Complex, like wild boy. And so, but man, when I'm going through the Psalms and when I'm looking at the Psalms, I mean, like, and you read these things, like, for example, there's this moment when David's on the run. Saul's trying to kill him. His homie Jonathan, who I preached the sermon is about, can't get to him. And then his enemies come and raid the city where he's holding camp at, kidnaps all his wife and kids and all the wife and kids of all his soldiers. And now his soldiers want to kill him.
Wow.
Like, so now Saul want to kill him. He can't find his homeboy. His wife and kids is gone. And the people who are on his team want to kill him. He had nobody.
Wow.
And the Bible says that David encouraged himself in the Lord. And
in the Lord.
And we have these Psalms of him, like, you talking about somebody with their back against the wall regularly.
Yeah.
And so I just think that he
had a good friend.
And he had a good friend.
Right.
Like, but, they couldn't FaceTime.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like they couldn't FaceTime.
Yeah.
Unavailable. And so he had to depend on Jesus.
Yeah.
And so I think we have to learn, and I've learned through a lot of things, and I'm learning that, man, like, Jesus really can fill them holes. Like, it's not just being a weird Christian and trying to, Jesus juke thing. Like, it really is. Like, I've learned that, like, man, when it's like when father and mother abandon me, then the Lord will take me up. And so, but to your point, that frees us. That gives us. Keller. There's been a lot of Keller drops. Like, read everything he ever wrote. Just all of it. Everything. If you say Tim Keller, read that joint. But he wrote a book, The Freedom of Self-Forgetfulness. He wrote a book, rather, Freedom of Self-Forgetfulness. Like, that anchoring in Jesus, it frees us to think of ourselves less. It gives us the freedom, because we ain't like, who's gonna be there for me? We know that Christ really got us.
He's really got us. I'm not sure there's anything more to say.
Yeah, no. I what more can I say? Like,
the answer is
nothing.
Jesus.
Nothing. Jesus. Like, oh yeah, well, Jesus, yes.
The answer is
Jesus. Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, that was really powerful.
Yeah.
Thank you for answering the many questions that I had about friendship. It seems like you really did study the topic.
I tried to. Thank you for all your questions. You've obviously, to the most traditions say a person demonstrates their intelligence not by the answers they give, but by the questions that they ask. And so
I'll take that.
Yeah. So thank you for your brilliant preparation.
Thank you.
All right.
All right.